Hello and welcome to the third episode of Pillow Talk with Core. My name is Eamon McGann and I'm the Client Solutions Director at Core, and I'll be your host today. Today I'm joined by Rye Austin, the Chief Commercial Officer at Core, and today we'll be talking about overcoming the complexities of a cloud-first remote working culture. Rye, can I ask you to do a brief introduction, please?
Sure, yeah. So thanks, Eamon. It's, as you mentioned, my name's Rye Austin. I look after the sales team in Core, also the marketing teams, and work very closely with HR. So I'm talking to both customers that are looking at this challenge and also with my own team. We've got a team here that are not immune from what's happening. So yeah, this remote working challenge is one that I face directly, and also chat to customers about what they're facing.
So Rye, in this episode, the focus is going to be a recent report that Core published on sleep patterns of IT professionals. But today I think we're going to particularly look at the impact of cloud technology and remote working and the stresses and strains that places on the IT professional. I should really highlight though that this survey we did was pre-COVID-19, so certainly cloud technology and remote working clearly played a big part of what we surveyed. However, today we're probably going to look at a little bit more of the context since COVID-19 as well. I think one of the good news that really came out very strongly from our survey was that of those that were surveyed, a large percentage, 57%, said that cloud technology had improved their work-life balance and general satisfaction in work. For us, that's a great stat. But I think what we want to delve into a little bit deeper today is, whilst that's good news, there is a fair degree of skepticism in the marketplace around cloud. So we deal with it day to day, so we'll delve into it in a little bit more detail. I think in terms of a little bit of housekeeping, in terms of the report itself, it is available on Core's website. It was carried out by an independent organisation, Savanta, and I highly recommend that you have a look at that. There's some fairly significant details in there, and right on the screen right now, we've put a link to our website where you can download that report. So Rye, you and I hear a lot about the benefits, and we actually talk about a lot about the benefits of a cloud-first approach, whether that's in terms of resilience and the ability to be cloud-ready in times like we're seeing right now, and Core ourselves, we had to become cloud-ready really overnight to allow us to do seamless working. The vast scale that Microsoft have in terms of security resources, allowing IT professionals to really focus in on what they need to, the incidents, the threats, and then in general, how cloud empowers IT pros to focus in on the technical tasks that they need to be looking at. From your perspective, I'm just keen to understand whether you agree with the cynicism that's in the community, or understand the cynicism in the community that really cloud is just taking the stresses from on-prem and moving to the cloud. What's your thoughts on that?
Yes, it's a good question, and I can kind of understand it. I wouldn't say I agree with it, but I fully understand where people are coming from, because I guess maybe we're part of this as well, but people talk about the cloud and the benefits that it will bring, and that can come across as that a cloud transition will solve all of your problems. And I think anyone that's been involved in IT for long enough will realize that that's simply not true. There are huge gains to the cloud. There are some considerations with a cloud move as well. But I think it's unfair to say that a cloud transition would just solve all your problems. But to those that kind of say that moving to the cloud is just moving the same kind of problems into a cloud-based area, I'm not sure that's true either. When we're talking to customers about what solutions they're looking for, what their business requirements are, we tend to try and balance the benefits of a solution versus the problems that a solution may have, or rather the compromises you might have to accept with any given solution. So I think if you look at a classic legacy solution, it may have been fit for purpose when it got put in place a number of years back, but as business changes, their requirements and needs change, the benefit of that solution will go down. Over time, as technology ages, the problems for that solution will also increase. So the balance will shift from being it's working really well for us, the problems are low. Later on in its life, the benefits reduce, the problems increase, and at that stage, someone says, okay, this thing's no longer what we need, it's no longer fit for purpose, this now needs a change. So to change from a system that's run its course, isn't delivering value anymore, to a new solution that is in many cases now cloud-based, I think it's unfair to say that the same problems will move, because they won't. There'll be new problems. There'll also be a lot of new benefits though. So really, when we see a new solution being taken live, if it's done correctly, and that's the key point here, is that a cloud, not all cloud moves are the same, and not all cloud solutions are equal. So picking the right solution, and if cloud's the right vehicle for that, then great. But picking the right solution that delivers against the value that a customer needs, where the challenges or compromises that it brings, because nothing's perfect, unfortunately, the balance should be much better. So there's a lot of benefit you get from the cloud, but it's not to say that cloud solves all your problems. There's no magic wand that can solve all of our ills, but it's definitely the right kind of platform delivery vehicle for most of our customers.
Okay, cool. You picked particularly on legacy in there, and I know personally we get involved in a lot of legacy transformation where the core, excuse the pun, of the legacy solution may in its essence be operational and effective, but as you say, over time it's reducing. But cloud technology, whether it's SaaS based or PaaS based, we're seeing definitely some key benefits on that. I think that kind of links maybe to the next question that I had, which was around the effectiveness and of what an MSP or a managed service provider like us can add when people are moving to the cloud. One of the things that we effectively do is we take the so-called burden of day-to-day business as usual activity and help manage that in the cloud, but also manage it for multiple customers. Looking at it from an organizational perspective, what is the benefit really you see that the organizations will gain from working with an MSP, not necessarily us, but like us, to help manage some of that business as usual activity?
Yeah, I mean, this is in itself a huge topic, but it's very similar to me in how we were discussing many years back around the build versus buy for project work. There is always going to be a degree of internal IT teams that have trying to think of a better word for this, but empire building. They've got a team that are used to looking after systems internally. They're often keen to show value to the business that they can own these things internally without a need to go outside for those skills. And there's a discussion about, is it right for internal IT to look after those kind of systems or not? And with outsourcing or the cloud, the benefit of passing those challenges and those problems to a specialist. And I think there's no single answer that will be right for every organization. It's different in different cases. But if you're looking at standardized platforms like email, like messaging, like document management, in many cases, if you're a retailer or manufacturer, it's probably not in your interest to try and build an empire sufficiently large internally to have the complete breadth of skill set you would need to look after those systems. So an MSP to manage them, having them hosted in the cloud, you basically pass off those challenges to experts. And in many cases, they do it in scale. They do it very well. They invest. Their organizations are geared towards doing that specific thing. So ideally, do a better job than most people that are trying to turn their hand to it for the first time. So the experience that you get, the expertise you get, the IP they developed, they can pass as economies back to their customers. So in many cases, an MSP outsource using the cloud is right for many solutions.
Just picking up on a couple of points there, Rye, you talked about kind of the expertise element. I know, looking at a survey done by ESG Group back in late 2019, particularly on the security area, a lot of organizations are shifting their workloads and their security workloads into the cloud. So the traditional managing security devices on-prem, there's a massive shift to using cloud-based, Microsoft technology, etc., MTP, all of those kind of technologies. And I think the survey really highlighted that CISOs and CIOs are really looking at a skill shortage in that particular area, and wanting to empower an IT pro to be able to be part of that security piece, but also being able to use MSPs or security-based MSPs. So things like threat analysis, staff augmentation, that kind of thing. So from an IT pro perspective, where do you see the benefits to them? So we've talked about the organization, but where do you see the benefits to the IT pro, whether they be an IT pro or security analysts, in terms of working with an MSP?
Yeah, and it's probably good for me to start with what I see these kind of IT pros are looking for. So they all want an outcome. They all have a challenge in their business around protecting their data, controlling data, knowing who can see it, when they can see it, making sure they get the balance right between disrupting end users and protecting the business from data leakages or other security threats that they could have. And they all, in my mind, they all want to get an outcome. I don't think they wake up each morning and decide that they want to be experts in kind of turning the handles and configuring the platform and being experts in the tooling. To me, they just want the outcome. So what an MSP brings is they give them a very easy way of achieving that outcome. They've got a team of experts that are ready to go. So all the challenges around staffing, skills retention, learning new tooling, configuring the tooling, doing these things in an efficient, scale-driven way, that gives IT pros the outcome they want without the challenge of doing it themselves. So for me, it's about what is the outcome they want to achieve, and that's where I spoke earlier about kind of the build versus buy. If we focus on what the business needs and what the IT pros need, what's the best way of delivering that? Which is why I don't think that there is a cloud's always the right answer. I don't think a custom build's always the right answer. I think we start with what needs to be delivered, work out the best way of delivering that for value for money and fit for the customer. That tends to lead us towards a cloud delivered service, but that's where we might end up by going through what the customer needs to achieve at the end, rather than starting with its cloud and then working out how it's going to work.
Okay. Yeah, I think just linking to what you're saying, for me, one of the questions we often get asked about is, we've got an existing IT team, will moving to an MSP significantly change our resourcing? In our experience, certainly what we've found is that IT pros and the acceleration of their careers in terms of being able to take on additional skills. I know we ourselves, and we often talk about this as a use case, when we became much more of an MSP 6, 7, 8, 9 years ago, some of the staff that we had that would have been normal frontline IT pros really did a lot of skilling up and are now, for example, some of our existing Azure third line architect team are all kind of previous IT pros who use that kind of skilling up. So I think certainly I see a huge opportunity for IT pros to use the cloud as a skilling, albeit you might argue they said that's yet more training and more learning that they have to do. But again, there's a balancing act. I think the final part of this kind of question, if you like, is a lot of what we've been talking about are kind of tactical benefits of an MSP coming together with an organization. But I know one of the things that we're very passionate about is continual service improvement, and what that means in terms of a very rapidly changing landscape in terms of technology, and how doing continuous service improvement, really the strategic impact it has for our customers. Frankly, Rye, you work with probably 2 or 3 of our largest customers, both general customers and ones that we manage their estates. How are you seeing that from a strategic impact perspective?
Well, we tend to focus on, it's not so much what the service will do in day one, it's what the roadmap that someone's buying into. So if we were to take a discussion, for example, about Azure or Microsoft 365, we tend to focus on how the organization can refocus their skills. Most customers, no one's complaining about having too many people or too much budget to spend on IT. They're always challenged with IT issues. If they invest poorly in platforms, that tends to raise call volumes. Therefore, their teams get flooded with doing tactical responsive activity. Strategic stuffing can take a back seat. And by us taking off their hands some of that harder strategic stuff, then they can focus on what's right for their business, what's bespoke for their business, because we can be experts in security or messaging or delivering apps to their machine or Windows 10 management. We can take those problems away from them and own that roadmap in consortium with them. If we get their direction around where they want to see their company go and where IT plays a role in helping supporting that growth, but we can deal with the problems associated with delivering against their goals. Then, because they're experts in their business and their customers, what makes them different, they can refocus their IT teams towards systems that are bespoke to them, not so much the commoditized ones. We can make sure they're productive, their tooling works, their desktops work, they're secure. We can do, dare I say it, the boring stuff, but important stuff, and make sure it works, which means they can focus on the really brilliant stuff that's sector specific or what makes them different or really what separates them from their competitors. And if IT is simply flooded with day-to-day stuff around email or desktop support, there's no way on earth they can take their skill set and apply it to make a more effective organization and compete more effectively with with their competitors. So that's where I see the difference, is that there's an important roadmap that we can own, that we can work with people like Microsoft and the big partners we work with in the ISV space to make sure they're getting the best of breed and they're always improving, and that frees up their teams to do the more specific kind of domain solutions for their business.
Okay, cool. I mean, I think what that leads quite nicely into is, what are people actually doing in the cloud? One of the pieces of research that I often quote and looked at last year was Gartner's yearly research circle survey they do. And instantly for me, in 2017, the survey asked CIOs kind of what's the main reason you're moving to the cloud. Back in the 2017 report, shifting workloads was kind of absolutely the number thing. So it was kind of a mass, let's get stuff to the cloud by the looks of it. Interestingly, the 2019 report had the emphasis had changed. It now really was about new ways of working and embracing new ways of working. Not that shifting workloads had gone away. It was still quite high on the list, but it had dropped down a wee bit. So I think what I'm trying to understand really from your perspective, Rye, is how is moving to the cloud more than just lifting and shifting some workloads, and kind of what are the gains people can expect to see by using cloud services?
Okay, yeah, and this is a conversation that we have a lot, as you know. I think it's probably a good place to start by what we mean by lift and shift, because it's even that it can be interpreted differently. So what we see is, and how I interpret as lift and shift, is where someone's taken an existing solution they've got, which is sat on some servers in a data center or in an office somewhere, and simply trying to get rid of some of the hardware or infrastructure issues they've got with that by moving that current system onto a cloud hosted platform. So that's kind of a lift and shift. It's easy to do, it's quick to do. I say easy, it can be easy, depends on the solution itself, but it's often the easiest way of achieving some cloud-based delivery, and also delivers against some of the benefits of the cloud, but it's nearly always a compromise solution. So that quick and easy shift is rarely the best way of going to the cloud, but it's got, in my opinion, it's one that's adopted a lot because it's much easier to take a current platform and move it to the cloud than it is to actually embrace the benefits of the cloud. That generally involves a large amount of rework. The way the cloud works, the way security works, the way data works, the security requirements, the UI, the way it's consumed. It's a whole new way of working. So to truly get the benefit of the cloud, it's generally going to be a redevelopment to kind of embrace those new ways of working, the new security ways, not just to re-platform an old solution. But that, again, it's down to that balance of effort and return. So I said there's no single way of doing things that works for every organization, for every solution. But yeah, the lift and shift one is rarely where we see the most effective gains.
Okay. I think just linking again, I think to what you said, Rye, from my personal perspective, you and I both get involved in that early stages of customers to understand, where they're going to get benefit from the cloud, and we work across a lot of sectors. Different sectors are adopting at different rates, and in the last 2 months, we've seen an absolute explosion of certain levels of adoption. But one area that I personally get involved in, as you know, Rye, is where it comes to moving things like data and file workloads. I mean, there's a lot of organizations have worked out keeping lots of files and file servers is not a great way to manage, for lots of kind of technical reasons and structural reasons. But what we are seeing is a mix between lift and shift of just chucking the files into, say, something like SharePoint and not really understanding the benefits. So for us, the big change there is making sure that that's not done just purely as a lift and shift, but done as a structured migration to the cloud. Thankfully, if you're using something like SharePoint in 2020, a lot of the new tech coming down the channel, like Project Cortex, at least allows us to put some form of structure, automated intelligence on the data. So I think linking what we're both saying is pick the right workloads and understand what's the best way to get them there. So it isn't all about massive projects, but it is about making sure you just don't chuck the stuff over. So a lot of benefits with a little bit of thought, I think, is the key point. I think expanding that a little bit, there is a massive explosion in the last 2 months. We've seen a very significant shift in what we're doing in terms of helping customers move to the cloud, and particularly the explosion of Teams in the last 2 months for obvious reasons. I think what we're also seeing, though, is a very concerted effort for people to look at adopting secure remote working practices. So we're seeing discussions around MFA, so multi-factor authentication. We're seeing people talk about how can they use conditional access to support remote working. So a lot of statistics out there, but one that still is a little bit concerning is around how little things like multi-factor authentication are being used. So I think from a practical perspective, from your perspective, what concerns do organizations have about the particular tools and technologies needed for remote working, and how can a cloud first model actually help overcome the kind of challenges that people have with remote working?
Yeah, so there's a lot of parts to that. So I think the best place to start, I mean, with the tools and the kind of technologies, we get a lot of concern about where data lives, about where it can move to, about legislation like GDPR, and if you're regulated, how the impact of that is. There's a lot of unknowns about how things will work. So I think the lack of clarity around how things work fundamentally, confusion from management teams. We definitely see a slower uptake in sectors like legal, where there's a belief that they need greater control over their data. And I'm sure it's not just a belief. I'm sure it's correct. But there are certain industries that can embrace the cloud quicker. Certain industries that are slower to adopt these things. But the big one for me is that it's just not understood fully. A belief that data is going to be more at risk in the cloud beyond of a Windows 2003 server is rarely actually accurate. So there's not enough information about what's really going on. So people are making decisions without the right facts, and therefore they're nervous. There's also, as we spoke about in terms of how it affects IT teams, there's also concerns about in the past what they know, and that fear of change is that we had a team of X number of people that looked after that environment. If we go cloud-based, that gets passed to somebody else, and there's that lack of control, which they may need, they may feel uncomfortable with. So there's definitely legitimate conversation around how that will change, what it means to their organization, what it means to their team, and how the way they work and their practices and the way that they secure data, that will all need to be revisited. So some of these problems or some of these challenges that are discussed in isolation, it's not just that solution being pushed to the cloud. It's a bigger conversation around how's it done, how's it going to work, the tools, the processes, the technologies, a deeper understanding around what that means with information, how it's going to work for their end users, and making the right decision based on what, again, go back to my earlier point around what's the business trying to do. Often we see localized technology conversations being had about where to move this bit of tech, and sometimes need to step back and say, hang on a second, what are we trying to do here? How do we, as a company, as a business, what do we need to achieve out of this given information we have, or how do we help our customers, wherever it is that they're trying to do, and what's the right way of doing that? And that could well be cloud, it could well be something else, but I think going back to why we're doing this and what's it mean to us and what we're trying to do tends to lead us to the right place, rather than localizing, we've got some data here, where do we put it? Sometimes you can get lost in detail and not ask the big questions around, is that still right? Is the old way we did things, is that still right? It may be, but it's just, I think it's you tend to arrive at the right answer if you elevate the discussion a bit and then go back down to actually now, is that still going to be true to what we need as a business? And if it is, great, but sometimes projects that we've been discussing disappear completely because that conversation gets lifted to what we're trying to do, what we're trying to achieve, and an old project that was planned for might decide it's not required now, it gets completely stopped. But in its place, a whole new piece of work starts to do something, but at least then it's being done for the right reasons. So it's a huge topic, and one that we enjoy having most weeks.
Yeah, I think final part for me on that topic would be one of the concerns I hear on a pretty regular basis, and I'm particularly taking a Microsoft technology slant on this one. Customers who have E3 and E5 or E1. I think one of the concerns I hear pretty regularly is when we talk about technology is cost and the awareness that there are so many layers to the cake in terms of what you can turn on and turn off. But ultimately, at its most base level, things like multi-factor are pretty much baked into everything that Microsoft do. So I think discussions we're having is around, yes, there are some very high-end security stuff that might be only in E5, but actually that's the final icing on the cake. There are a lot of other things we can do to get you fundamentally secure based on the fact that you now have 100%, 90% of your workforce now working from at home office. So I think for me, the summary would be that, yes, there's a huge amount of tech, but actually the basic stuff is available. it's in the product pretty much, depending on your licensing, and it's about getting that deployed quickly and efficiently. Just kind of changing the balance a little bit, and really going back to the working practices and more of a personal view of working remotely. Interestingly, speaking to a colleague, an ex actually member of staff who used to work with us many years ago. He's working from home at the minute. He's a lead security analyst for a large organization. He's had some fairly big, major budget cuts. He's had some team furloughing. So he's under a lot of pressure from a kind of day-to-day, keeping the lights on perspective. But strikingly, in the conversation, it was only last week, one of the things he said that really was an interesting dynamic for him was his isolation. He's part of quite a big team in this particular organization, and he said, connectivity to his line management and to the wider team he found difficult. So I think you personally, Rye, you've led a team in Core now for a long time. It's quite a diverse team. You've got people kind of both internationally now, so people in our Poland office, and we've got people in our UK office and around the UK. So you've had a good mix, and you've been doing that now for a number of years. Do you think that kind of experience of doing that for a number of years has and working with remote workers has helped you? And now that we're all remote working, what changes have you made to kind of how you lead and motivate a team? In your personal perspective, what works?
Yeah, and that's a tricky one, if I'm honest. I actually did genuinely think that we were really well set up for this in terms of how the team was managed, the plans we had, the kind of just the BAU, the way we interacted. As you say, we were working remotely already. So naively, I was thinking that yes, there's challenges in the marketplace, there's customer demand changes, there's a fundamental shift in what people are priorities are these days. It's moving week by week around. Certainly things that weren't problems a few months back that from March become top priority. So I wrongly thought that the challenges I'd face would be customer focused ones. And what's become clear we're now in this for probably week 8 or 9 now, I actually lost count. It's they're all blurring, but one of the bits that I've learned as time's gone on here is that technology has been fine. We were well geared up for this anyway, so we were quite fortunate in that sense. We didn't have any problems with technology. Our business plans were sound. Our tooling was remote ready, so that our systems worked, our tooling worked. The plans were fundamentally all fine for this. It was more the human part that I wasn't ready for. The social interaction reduction, the effect on team members just by having days where they're a bit flat, where they've been in homebound for too long, having fever. Kids at home through schooling, and when you are managing a larger team, as many people are, because most of the time you've not got time to spare, it's very easy to get focused on running plans, managing through tasks, reacting to things as they occur. And I also myself found that what would have been maybe a 5-10 minute conversation, a quick catch up's a half-hour meeting. And actually sometimes half hour was probably too long, but you've not had a catch up with someone for a while, so you'll use that time. So you find your diary gets filled very quickly, more so for me than it was before. But I still didn't quite realize the impact of the person behind the role, and not just the tasks at hand or immediate challenges or working through a queue of jobs, but actually seeing how people are getting on with life, in kids at home, being homebound, that social disconnect that even though we have good tools to interact with people now, it's not quite the same as having a chat in the office. And so I've looked at how we put in place different one-to-ones. So an old technology, an old framework I used to use around stop, start, keep, which is working pretty well, is that very much a two-way conversation with the team members about what we're doing that's well. Stop, start, keep. What we're doing now we should stop doing. What's not working, what's causing us problems, and do that both ways. And then the start element around what are we not doing that we should be doing. So what in this new way of working, what's not being done that needs to be more effective. And then lastly, to kind of leave a good impression around a summary of what's happening and what's working well. What should we keep doing? What is it that for the manager they're doing well, and for the person that's being managed, what is it that both sides are doing well? So I think that stop, start, keep piece a more regular feedback cycle around, what we're doing, is it working well? Because I wrongly assumed that we were so well set up for this remote working malarkey that our ways of managing the team were going to just carry on as they were, and that caught me out a bit. So extra feedback cycles, more questions around each of the one-to-ones. How are we doing, guys? How are we getting on? How's it working for you? How are you feeling? Those kind of things don't naturally occur for me all the time. So I've made a more conscious effort to, in those ones-to-ones, add an extra human dimension around how are you feeling? How are you getting on? What can we do to help you? What are the challenges you're facing that are external to just the work piece? And that's, say, kids being homeschooled. And that's the bit that really caught me out. But with that, you can react to it, but it's not one that I immediately thought about. In hindsight, I probably should have done, but I naively thought that we were pretty well set and that therefore we should be able to carry on largely as we were.
I think the interesting piece for me on that one, Rye, and kind of part of the question was about before and now after that we've had kind of since March. I know that with one member of your team who's based in Cardiff, and Kat, when she moved to Cardiff, one of the things I noticed, and whether that was kind of a collective view or collective behaviour that was decided at the time, but I can personally remember Kat was a very active member of the local team, and I'm going back now well over a year, if not longer. Time is flying, but to me, I remember personally thinking, "God, that's going to be quite a big change not having Kat in the office." She's vocal. She's always asked lots of questions. She's in the mix nearly almost day in, day out. And one thing I noticed, again, my comment really is whether this was behavioural or whether it's intentional behaviour, is I nearly felt Kat was more in the office because as I walked around the team, I always noticed that when Kat was talking to the guys, she was on camera. She was always on camera. They were on camera, and albeit she was on a screen. You heard her voice through the speakers and stuff. So she was distant. She was in Cardiff, but yet she was very much part of the team, and that behaviour became a practice, certainly in your team. So I mean, that was a behaviour I observed looking in at the team. Are there other kind of behaviours that you think are just happening, and kind of mindsets that, one, in terms of management, but also just day to day how the guys actually operate?
Yeah, I mean, the Cat one's interesting because we in the team we've largely had home-based workers for, I think, 5-6 years now. So it's not a new concept, but it did, with lessons we learned from that around replacing that social interaction, or not replacing it, but finding a different way of doing it. So as now we've got, it's not for everyone, but we've got kind of quizzes at lunchtimes every Wednesday as a team lunch. We have a quiz or a Q&A type thing, or some kind of fun game the team play on Wednesdays, just to bring the team together to replace some of that social interaction that's lost through remote working. And Kat still has cigarette breaks. I think she's stopped now, but she used to have cigarette breaks with Hannah, and actually have chats on Teams, so they even have their breaks together, they weren't in the office. So some of those kind of differences they put in place to substitute when someone's not in the office with them or physically close to them. They can still have that interaction, albeit by a digital method, but it's one that keeps us pretty close as a unit. And like you say, Kat's never out of mind, never far from mind. I mean, I just think we've now got multiple means of communicating. So between Yammer, Teams, IM, email, there's a constant buzz between the team. So it doesn't matter where you're on the world, you still feel that buzz, and there's everyone's chiming in and chipping in, and we find a way of having some kind of fun social and on-work stuff to kind of not have the team just stuck in completely stale stuff. I mean, I've always been a big believer in measuring the actual output, measuring what's done, and not necessarily kind of how it's done, because different team members have different strengths, different ways of working. And I think just remote working allows that. So Paul's based out Bristol way, and I speak to Paul 3 or 4 times a week, and it never really crossed my mind that we're physically rarely in the same place. We still have a really close working relationship, and that the distance doesn't cause a problem. So I think that's where I felt we were quite well set up anyway, because we had that remote working piece I thought nailed. But the bit that surprised me was when people are stuck in their homes for a few months, there's a psychological challenge that the team are hitting, which there's the one that I wasn't expecting. But through team-based working, there's quite a few little neat tips and tricks we found to kind of keep the team close, and lots of social groups and lots of forums that we're sharing information around, and Teams and Yammer and IM are a huge part of that.
Cool, thank you, Rye. I know we've, excuse me, I know we've, in parallel, we've a number of podcast series, and we've actually covered that topic in a number of areas. And I think we've, for those that are interested in that topic, I'd recommend you look at the Read Only About It podcast, where we've looked at, we've talked to a number of industry people, and we've looked at kind of some of the things people are looking at in that space. So, Rye, thank you very much for your time for this episode. I think we've covered some really good points and some great points around how we overcome the complexities of a cloud-first remote working culture. I think for me, the thing that I highlighted or came across quite clearly throughout is that how a cloud-first approach really continues to keep IT at the heart of the business. And for me, that's one of the concerns I hear day in, day out. Are we still, we are an important part of the business. I think cloud-first probably puts IT even further at the heart of the business. And you extended that point really around how, as managed service providers, we allow them to focus in really on what's important and help them deliver the roadmap. Having a roadmap, understanding what's going to happen in the next 2 or 3 years, and being able to do that with confidence is really some of the things we can achieve with a cloud-first approach. Also, I think you were very clear, and you always are when we talk to customers. We're not saying it's cloud only. We're not saying it's cloud for everything. There are strategies. There are situations where it's just not appropriate, and you pick particularly on legacy and how sometimes some legacy apps really just need to be revitalized, extended, improved, embellished, whatever way you want to look at it. So I think it is about having a multi-tiered approach to it. So again, Rye, thanks for your input on that. We have covered a lot of topics, and we related to some degree to some of the comments in the report itself. But again, I'd highlight that the report that we did on sleep patterns a couple of weeks ago has some really amazing insights. For me personally, there was 2 or 3, if not more, insights that I thought, wow, wasn't expecting that. So I'd highly recommend you download that report. Again, the link is on screen. So many thanks for watching, and see you on the next episode.
Thanks, Eamon, and thanks for watching.